All right. You're back on the East Coast. Big tour last year. Books coming up. How you feel with everything these days? Are you in a good flow? Is life more or less back to normal? Talk to me about the world of Tony Levin right now.
It's not normal, but it's good. Everything's good. We musicians who have any work are very grateful, and have some artistic output is even better. That's really important to me. During the years of lockdown with less touring, I was lucky to have some touring and quite a bit of recording. And then I devoted, we'll talk about this book I put out, this photo book. I decided that in the worst of it in 2020 to devote the year to going through the tens of thousands of negatives I have of pictures I've taken on the road through all these years. And by the end of that year, I had a quite acceptable book to put out, and I feel very good about that. So I'm plugging away the way all us artists and musicians are.
Exactly. So, right, circling right back to the book, when you and I spoke last, when King Crimson was coming into town, one of the things I asked you towards the end of the interview was, what's the next thing you want to accomplish? Or like, what's the next feather in your cap? And you said it was this book, but, at that time you were, already putting this together. And obviously the website of yours was one of the first that had been around for a long time. You've been, a photographer for a long time. You're coming back to your hometown to release this book. Has that sunk in yet? I mean, this has been something that you've spent decades working on. Has it kind of hit home that you're actually achieving this thing and it's going to happen?
It's not quite like that. That's a good narrative. Maybe I should just adopt that and twist the
All
reality
yours.
a little bit. Yeah, it's always worth considering. No, in fact, the touring of King Crimson has been very interesting, and we were very lucky to be able to tour all of last year, 2021, and kind of wound up the band's touring probably forever at the end of the year. So it was a really successful and poignant year for us. But as for the photography, yes, I've been working at it a long time, and it really, without the lockdown, I wouldn't have had the time to do this book. And the book's been out a little while. Actually, it came out at the beginning of last year, and wonderful to, I guess, the best part of it, the best feeling to me is to be able to present these pictures, because I have a unique, being on stage and taking photos. Yeah, I should be playing the bass and not thinking about photos, but because I've been doing it so long and occasionally get lucky and grab a good picture, but always from this vantage point that shows the audience behind Peter Gabriel, behind Paul Simon or Seal or Peter Frampton, all the many artists I've been lucky to have in front of me on stage. If I'm lucky, I capture something of what's special about this thing touring.
So that's actually, we can circle. I had a couple of questions about actually developing the film, but we'll get to those in a second, because I want to stick with this idea of, these photos are a combination of things like behind the scenes. There are sort of some selfies of you in the mirror. You have one, on stage with all of these, other big names besides King Crimson too. You're someone who is still touring. It's not like that this is, the final stop. It's not like you're not done doing this, but as you're looking through all of these, different photos, are there any that kind of stand out? Are there any like thoughts and feelings? Do you have like moments of reflection as you're looking through this? Because this is a massive archive with a lot of different stuff. So I know that was a big question, but like, is there anything that kind of washes over you as you're going through some of these?
Thank you. Well, thank you for that quote of yours that I wrote down, selfie. I'm going to use that sooner or later. And jumping to a similar thing in the question you asked, if I had a favorite, I'm not big on favorites of my photos or my music, but if I have a favorite of this, it's a photo of Peter Gabriel pre-crowd surfing. So I'm stealing your way of talking about things, because in the late 70s, early 80s, when we did the piece, Lay Your Hands on Me, Peter started floating out into the audience, and boy, were they surprised when that happened. Nobody had ever done anything like that I know of. I'm going to grab the book, and I think I made a mark of that picture so I can show you what I'm talking about. Actually, I got a number of pictures of it, but yeah, I'm not good at holding pictures up.
That's perfect.
Anyway, yes, people took pictures of it, but there I was on stage and vamping on lay your hands on me, while we waited for the audience to have it in their mind to return Peter to the stage, which sometimes was 5-10 minutes. So I got a lot of photos, but only a few of them came out. Anyway, to go back to what you asked about, very gratifying to have a chance to present these pictures that present a viewpoint that other people don't usually have. And I decided I had a lot of choices about how to organize the book. I thought about doing it by band or by tour or chronologically through my career. And I decided to present it as a day, as what it's like on the road. So the first chapter is in travel, some pretty interesting pictures of trains, planes, and being stuck on boats and things like that. And just sitting around in the travel, which is frankly a lot of our day when we tour. And then a chapter on getting to the venue, and a very poignant part of the day is going on stage. If I'm lucky, I could capture some of the magic of what that's like, different than every kind of show. And yeah, and then of course on stage, and a chapter of just portraits of some of the guys I've toured with. So that's how I decided to organize the pictures. Really, that was only late in the day. Most of that year, 2020, I spent choosing which pictures to take. And finally, I got it down to 800. And then I knew I had to get it down to about 250. That's a work of art. And it really took up a lot of the year, which was kind of fun.
Yeah. So talk to me more. So what's interesting about doing things on film as opposed to digital, a film camera can generally only hold so much. B, as opposed to, when you're processing a photo on like Photoshop or something, if you don't do something right, you can just, hit Control Z and then just do it again. So, so talk to me about the actual process of, developing this film. You've been taking photos for, a long time. So I'm sure you've had a lot of developing experience, but it's a different level when you're putting it out on the book as opposed to just, for the website or your own self. Any mentality shift when you're trying to do the, process the negatives, anything you're really trying to think about, or is this kind of another day in the office processing?
It's changed through the years. It's changed a lot. You're very astute to bring up the subject, which is fascinating. For youngsters, I could explain that there was this thing called film, and we used to take a picture and we actually couldn't see how it came out. You just look at the back of the camera and there was nothing there. So a lot of these pictures were taken with Tri-X, with black and white film. You had to choose what kind of film, of course, before you put it in the camera. And I would take it, for instance, in Europe in the 70s and 80s of Peter Gabriel, King Crimson on tour. And then I would have to find what we called a 24-hour developing place, a quick 24-hour developing place in some city, maybe in touring Germany. If I got a day off in the city, get the pictures developed. And then I look at it and I say, okay, this one scene that I'm going for on stage is out of focus all the time, or I need to do something different. And then I would adjust, and more days or weeks would go by. So that's the way it was early on. And then in the 90s, when I started my website, I decided to put these pictures up, and that was pretty interesting. They were tiny. For those who know pixels, they were 220 pixels wide, was the biggest you could put on the web. So it was a pretty interesting process, changing the film to digital and then getting it sent to a webmaster who could put it up. And then I made the biggest mistake of my, by far the biggest mistake of my photographic career. I switched to digital very early. So everything I shot through from about 95 till 2002, I have it, but it's really crummy, small, low resolution digital. I don't think any of those pictures made it to the book. Oh, well. And then I jumped on digital and like everybody learned it slowly and learned Photoshop and now nowadays, really for quite a few years, I'm very happy with digital. I prefer it. I love being able to look at the picture. Okay, didn't come out right, take it again, and not have to wait 2-3 days to find that out.
Yeah, it's a much more instantly gratifying process, and it's a little less to think about too.
Yeah, and to interrupt,
sure.
One learns I'm not the only one aware of this. When you use the Photoshop, it's like there's a distinct parallel between that and being a musician in the studio. And when I record the bass, I know, okay, afterwards I can do this. If I need to, I could do this. And you get very familiar with that process. Likewise, when you're familiar with Photoshop, and then I'm backstage with King Crimson and I see a situation, I know that if I shoot it a certain way, it doesn't have to be perfect. I know I can adapt it in a certain way, and it'll come out showing the scene I want, the way I want to show the scene.
Exactly. And I want to circle back because one thing that's I always tell people who are, new to news, like, we just hire interns. I mean, like the defining part of the news business is taking a lot of information and condensing it in a way that like captures the essence of what you're going for. And in a way, when you're working with tens of thousands of photos and you have to get it down to 200, a little over 200, that's tough because there's a lot of stuff you want to keep in there, but when you're going down and down and down and down, what's your thought process from going from tens of thousands to 200? What were some things you were looking for? I mean, you talked about how you're organizing it, but I mean, what's going through your mind as you're just getting rid of photos left and right to meet the 200?
Well, the first months were just being angry at myself for not organizing them better not when I took them, after I took them, because these weren't all nicely laid out in a program. They weren't all digital. Most of the good ones were digitized because I had used them for various reasons through the years, but a lot of them weren't, and I didn't want to later come across a negative that I never, or contact sheet. Oh my gosh, why didn't I use that? So going through everything took a long time, and that was a lot of kicking myself. Who knew? I didn't know that I was a professional photographer, and I didn't know that I would ever have the time to go through all of this. Having done that, picking them out, I found I work best in an analog kind of way. Print out the pictures, actually make up a mock book, and which pictures are opposite first of all, I wanted only one picture on a page and blank on the other, but that cut in half the number of pictures I could use. So which ones complement each other became a factor I didn't think of when I was choosing the pictures. And that's, I would wait, most days I would wake up in the morning and really, this very room was just covered with pictures on the floor, and kind of fun, kind of wading through a mess of pictures. And gradually they got into categories, and gradually I got this idea of, well, let's put the travel pictures in one chapter and things like that. So it was an artistic process that was, like most of them, really enjoyable and immersive while I was doing it. And one of the really important ingredients to me is that when it was done, I felt good about it. And I felt like, okay, it's not perfect, and there's some pictures that maybe could have got in there, but I'm not going to second guess myself. I feel very good about the result.
Well, there's not too much more we can ask for at the end of the day, those who are in the business of making something creative. But, the final thought here is, whether it's composing, music, putting together an album, a concert, or even if it's just one photo, I think one thing we're cognizant about artists, it's not just we express ourselves, but it's also something that, the consumer takes away from it, or, they're left with something, and the big theme of this, I mean, the name of the album is Images from Life on the Road. Is this really unique perspective of someone who's been all over the world with their own band, their own projects, some of, Western music's most recognizable names. But when someone goes through it, they take their time. It's a coffee shop book. They look through it and they reach the end, and it's, what do you want the consumer of your book to leave with once they, get through the whole?
Good question. And I haven't really asked myself that. That's a really good question. Makes the brain cells hopefully work. Let me have another sip of coffee.
I know, there we go. Get it supercharged.
I hope I know the reader of the book, or someone who shuffles through it, will get a sense of, oh, this is really telling me what it's like for those guys in rock bands out on the road, the gritty side of it, not so much the glamour side of it, but some of that. And it's a very interesting subject. In addition, and one hopes, but I don't know for sure, but many of the pictures will just look like fine art on their own. I worked very hard on these photos, and hopefully the reader will say, oh, this is art. I love this picture, and I would love to frame this and hang it up. And if many of the pictures are that way, then that's quite a success for a photo book, in my opinion.
Can people buy prints? If that's the case, if someone's looking at them and it's like, oh, this one's good, can they buy individual prints?
It's a different subject, but I this year released, only a month or two ago, released a very small series of 8 intaglio prints, very high quality prints of King Crimson. I picked 8 of the best. The book has 250. I picked 8 of my favorites, and indeed in the talk I'll be giving in Rochester, I'll bring a couple of them and put them up on easels so people can see them. The good photos, one feels, A, they deserve to be shared with the public and not just be, I have them at home in my house, and B, if they're really special, they deserve to have a high quality print available of them.
and you gave me my professional transition. You are coming back to Rochester, the place where you cut your teeth musically. You know, obviously you're a member of the Rochester Music Hall of Fame. It's hard to believe that ceremony happened in 2016, I believe, or 15, or way too long ago is the point. And obviously you've been in Rochester in this area, since then. But this was a part that was integral to your development as a musician, as a young man. How does it feel coming back here?
Always great to come to Rochester. I come quite often. I have good friends. It's my musical birthplace in a way. It's not my birthplace, but it's my musical birthplace. Good friends and good memories. In fact, as I was just recently, before thinking about the talk I'll give next Saturday, I was going through the book and I found a picture of Chuck Mangione over at the Eastman Theater, conducting us, rehearsing for the Friends in Love reunion in 2005, I think it was. And yeah, I have a lot of my heart is in Rochester. Always good to come back. And in this little talk about my book, and maybe more than that, it'll be a talk about my experiences on the road. I'll be right across the street from Eastman, where I went to school, and the Rochester Phil, where I got my classical start. And it'll be exciting.